Welcome to Stop Overthinking, the podcast for overthinkers, people pleasers, and perfectionists who want to feel calm and confident enough to handle whatever life sends your way. I'm your host, Kristen Odegaard, a women's life and mindset coach, lifelong educator, and recovering perfectionist. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Stop Overthinking. Have you ever had a time when you were so frustrated by another person because they just don't seem to be trying hard enough? Maybe it's someone you know that always complains but doesn't seem to do anything about changing their circumstances. Or maybe it's a coworker that seems okay with less than the quality of work than you produce or that you'd like to see. Maybe it's a person in a financial bind that just seems to be making one bad decision after another. Chances are you've had these kind of thoughts at some point. And for my high achievers out there, you likely have them multiple times a day because you have these high standards for yourself and project them onto the others around you. Here's the deal though. If you walk around assuming the worst of others, that they're not trying, they're sucking on purpose, or that they're out to get you, you're probably going to end up feeling pretty irritable, maybe even bitter. You might spend a lot of time feeling angry about other people's actions, and overall, it just doesn't feel very good. But just what if those people are doing the very best they can in that moment? What if you really don't know what their home situation is, the mental load they're carrying, their history, or their emotional capacity? What if they're doing all they can? Would that change how you think of them in that situation? This concept of generous assumptions has been popularized by Dr. Brene Brown. And generous assumptions force us to recognize and make allowances for the unknown circumstances of others. According to Dr. Brown, the assumption of positive intent means that we will extend the most generous interpretation possible to the intentions, words, and actions of others. So here's the question. Do you believe that other people are doing the best they can? In her research, it's pretty evenly split on how people answer that, almost 50-50. There are those people that say, hell no, I can give you 5 people off the top of my head that are not doing the best they can and should be doing better. Or maybe even there's an entire group of people that are lazy and unmotivated and definitely should be doing more than they are. But the other 50-ish% of people are saying, yeah, overall, I think people are doing the best they can in the given moment, considering what they have to deal with, their situations in life. Yeah, they're doing the best they can. So if you haven't answered this question for yourself yet, take a moment. Do you think people are doing the best they can on a regular basis? Additionally, are you doing the best you can? There isn't a right or a wrong answer here. But today's episode, I am going to share more about Dr. Brown's research and some ideas you can consider about positive intent or having generous assumptions. So if you are stuck here, like it's running through your mind that you know your sister isn't trying very hard to get a new job, but complains about it all the time, or that your dad shouldn't be so emotionally withdrawn and then you would be able to have a better relationship. Or maybe if your partner, loved you more, made more of an effort around the house, then your relationship would improve. So if you're not convinced that people are generally doing the best they can, you're not alone. And a lot of people just want some proof because they can think of all of the reasons that people aren't doing their best. And, there doesn't seem to be any evidence that they are. So Brene Brown covered this in her research, and she, just a blanket statement said, what if God came down, whoever your God, universe, infinite being is, came down and told you this person is truly doing the best that they can right now. This is based on what's going on in their life right now, the skills that they have. This is their best. If some higher being came and told you that, then could you believe it? Overall, people struggle with this, whether it's, believing in a higher power or not, or just believing people can do the best they can. But people struggle with this concept because it forces you to look at your judgments, your assumptions, your expectations of yourself and of others. And it doesn't mean that your thoughts are wrong. It's just recognizing that this is your manual of how things should be and recognizing these are your thoughts. So, this question, do you believe people are doing the best they can, challenges you to consider another perspective. If you're thinking maybe this person is doing the best they can, considering their emotional agility is less than yours, and their emotional capacity may never be what you want it to be, but it's all they've got. Maybe there's circumstances you don't know about, and maybe they just never learned or saw anything different. By nature, we tend to think of other people in a more negative manner. We're often suspicious and we think things like, why are they doing that? What's their agenda? We question that people are not always honest or trustworthy or giving you the respect you think you should deserve. But the reality is, you often think that because you have those same thoughts about yourself, or you have experienced something and you've done it differently. And of course, because that's the way you did it, and maybe we're successful, then everybody else should be able to do it too. And the challenge is, what if your assumptions, your thoughts, your ideas aren't the only answer for everyone else? What if something else is also true? We talk lots about our thoughts on this podcast, and we know that our thoughts are a product of how you were raised, how you were socialized, and based on your own individual life experiences. So just notice that while these thoughts might work for you, they aren't the only option, especially for other people. So if you've made it this far and you're like, all right, I get it. What's the point, Kristen? Where are we going with this? And I'm so glad you asked. When you assume positive intent or have generous assumptions, it brings you internally into a space such as curiosity or kindness, perhaps empathy, compassion, or grace. From those feelings, it opens up communication because when you are kind and compassionate and curious, you listen, you ask questions, you're open to new ideas and perspectives. It enables you to build trust with the other person. And all of those are things that we all want. We want to feel seen and heard and understood. And it's really hard to do those things when you're coming from a place of judgment or criticism or defensiveness. But again, this can be hard to do because it asks us to look in the mirror and at least acknowledge our assumptions. And while we often assume negatively of others, it's common to give yourself more of the benefit of the doubt. For example, if you're running late, in your mind, you have a valid reason, more so than another person who's running late that you think is just wasting your time. Or if you forgot someone's birthday, it's because you have a lot on your mind. But when somebody else does it, it feels careless and that you're not important. Your best likely looks different and isn't a constant either. It's based on what your work life has going on, how supported you feel at home, if you're feeling well, or even which week you're in of your cycle. But a lot of times we give ourselves the benefit of the doubt and think, yeah, I'm working hard, I'm doing what I can. And I'm showing up every day as a parent, as a spouse, as a daughter, as a friend. And a side note here, if you think that you're doing like you're working as hard as you can, but it's not good enough, that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about you putting in your effort. If you can believe that you're doing the best you can, and if you can believe that about yourself at some level, can you extend that to others? Because when you give that kindness and that compassion, you attract it back. And let's flip the script a little bit. You want to be with people who will assume the best of you, who aren't judgy or defensive or critical. You generally go to great lengths to do things for people who believe in you, who you trust, and who want the best for you. Those are the bosses and the employees that you want, the parents that you want, the partner that you want to have. So if you want that from others, ask yourself, are you being that person for others as well? So when your friend ignores the text for a couple of days again, what might be going on with them? When the service at the restaurant is so slow, you're bothering why you even bothered to come. Consider they're all running at maximum capacity, doing the best they can. That person who's driving 50 miles per hour on the interstate had that this morning, drove me absolutely nuts. And as I passed her, it was a little old lady who, for whatever reason, is, she's out, she's going someplace. Is it irritating to me that she's going 50 miles an hour when the speed limit is 70? Yes. But assuming that she's doing the best doesn't really cost me anything, and it helps me feel better. That's not to say that you can't have expectations. Okay. So please hear me on this one. It doesn't mean that everybody is going to be able to do the job. You just assume they're doing the best they can and they can automatically do everything. No, you can still have those expectations. But assuming that someone is doing the best they can in that moment is something you get to decide. Because bottom line, if you feel frustrated, disappointed, annoyed at a person, it really doesn't impact them. It's you. You're the one who feels it. And since your thinking impacts your feelings, you have the ability to pivot your thoughts for your own well being. I personally really like this because it feels better for me. I don't like feeling judgy of others, and I don't like being judged either. I choose to be kind and curious instead, and that's a choice that I intentionally make. And this has been a skill that I've been actively working on for the past 6 or 7 years. And it has been so helpful for me. But when I started, it was really hard. What I realized initially is that I am incredibly hard on myself and don't always believe that I'm doing the best that I can, even though I'm making serious effort, like it's not good enough. So, how could other people possibly be doing the best they can either? Like, nobody is ever doing their best. There's always room for improvement. And that awareness with that lack of self compassion and this incessant drive to do better and be better was being projected onto everyone around me. And that didn't feel good with that realization. In fact, I felt, you know, pretty, pretty exposed and then humbled that that's the way I was being. But practicing generous assumptions over time helped me to deal with my own self-worth and compassion issues, but also helped me emotionally as I was navigating a divorce and co-parenting because there were topics on the daily that we didn't agree with that I thought should be done differently. And I could choose to sit in that anger and frustration and bitterness and resentment eventually, or I just accepted these other people are probably doing the best they can, even if that's not the way I want it done. Overall, I thought, what's the worst that can happen if I give them the benefit of the doubt? If it's just someone in passing, it's not a big deal. Like that's grace. Go for it. And if I'm wrong and it's someone that I actually have a relationship with, that's the give and take of a relationship. Remember, that's how you want to be treated. So, what's the harm in treating others like that? Dr. Brown shares a conversation in some of her books and podcasts that when she was asking her husband his response to this question, do you think people are doing the best they can? He thought about it and came back essentially with, I'm not sure, but I know that my life is better when I assume that people are doing the best they can. And that's something that I've just embraced and I'm asking you to consider as well. So here's some practical kinds of things like how do you practice positive intent? What does that look like? What does it mean? So it could be giving people the benefit of the doubt. It might mean practicing empathy. It could be practicing your active listening skills and truly being curious. It could be avoiding making assumptions about other people or situations. And here's a big one for me too, is not letting the past affect the present, to stay present. Now, if you are still resisting this idea because you think that there's a certain person that this just isn't possible, or maybe that you're going to be a doormat or taken advantage of. Okay, pay attention to this next part. The key to protecting yourself from this whole, doormat or being taken advantage of is setting boundaries. You still get to decide how you want to respond. Brene Brown says, yes, I'm going to be generous in my assumptions and intentions while standing in my integrity and being very clear about what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Brown has found that the most compassionate people are also the most boundaried. I'm going to say that again. The most compassionate people have the most boundaries. And this is because maintaining boundaries keeps you out of resentment so that you can keep coming from that place of compassion and kindness and curiosity. And you've all felt that compassion fatigue or the fatigue from pleasing other people, right? So that's digging into your integrity, your values, your priorities, being able to have boundaries so you don't feel that way. So this is a really important caveat that gets lost a lot of times with the assumed generous assumptions. People don't recognize that boundaries go hand in hand with it. Back to Brown's research, compassionate people assume other people are doing the best they can, but they also ask for what they need and they don't put up with a lot of crap. That's her quote. Assuming that people are doing the best without setting boundaries and looking after yourself is another road into resentment, judgment, and misunderstandings. And we're just not our best selves when we're coming from those places. So having those generous assumptions, staying in a place of compassion, and having the boundaries to ask for what you need, say no when you need to, and to say yes when you really mean it. So at this point, if you're listening and absorbing, I just want to remind you, I did a whole podcast on boundaries. It was episode 10. You may want to go back and re-listen to it with this perspective on it and see how the two work together. So I challenge you this next week to consider positive intent from others and just see what happens. How do you feel? If this is brand new, I would start small with people that you don't know or even just one other person. But don't necessarily start with the person that you have the most infuriating thoughts about. That's often too big of a leap. Okay, we'll work up to that. So start small, see how it goes, and then build up. Hope this gave you something to think about. I'm assuming positive intentions that you are all listening and learning and being curious and that you want to pass that on to others. And I hope that you do. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you again soon.